This is Sean, aka Mailing a Baron. Welcome to Masterpiece Primer. This is a story time section of the Smooth Brews podcast where we'll read you a primer for you to fall asleep to. Today, we bring you the collaborative Gitrog primer, a CEDH primer created by the Gitrog Monster Discord server. A wonderful piece about a 6/6 frog horror that just loves to eat lands. Likes and dislikes. You might enjoy playing this deck if you like complex combos. This deck might have one of the most intricate and convoluted combos in the history of Magic, the Gitrog and Dakmor Salvage combo. And getting to know all of its ins and outs is a one-of-a-kind learning experience. If you like fast combo decks, not unlike many other competitive decks out there, our main goal is to win as quickly as possible through a combo. If you're entering an unknown metagame, Gitrog thrives in a large variety of metagames as she can win quickly to outrace other fast decks, as well as grind value against stacks or control. If you have a budget. While this list is all pimped out and budgetless, it's possible to make a semi-viable version of this deck that can be as cheap as $200. If you like decks that require a lot of intuition, Gitrog really rewards people who take risks, as many winning lines might have only a 70 to 80% chance of winning, if not less. If you enjoy proactive decks that can still play the long game, we're aiming to win as fast as possible, but contrary to other fast combo decks, we can just as effectively sit back and relax if people are holding up their counterspells, and look for an opportunity where we can take the game. If you have high amounts of knowledge of the game's rules, knowing something like Necropotence creating an exile trigger to a discarded Putrid Imp, so you can necromancy it onto the battlefield in response to the trigger, is an example of how advanced lines you can and often have to employ while piloting this deck. If you like playing and utilizing your commander often, our game plan often is built around resolving our commander as fast as possible, then proceeding from there. You won't like playing this deck if you don't like decks with a steep learning curve. Again, the winning combo is very difficult to grasp offhand, and it often requires a high amount of knowledge of the game's rules and a lot of gold fishing with the deck to understand completely. If you don't like combo decks, we are a pure all-in combo deck, and our ways to victory without our combo are few and far between. If you don't like long turns, while gathering and landing the pieces that combo off is relatively simple, the combo itself takes a long time to play out. Might also apply if your playgroup frowns upon having long winning turns. If you have a meta that has too much of stacks or control in it. People like gunning down the combo player's resources to the gutter in these kinds of metagames, so brace yourself if you're going to play this deck in such an environment regardless. If you prefer decks without creatures, we play a ton of creatures, although we only occasionally use them for combat. If you prefer utilizing tools provided by blue, or to a smaller extent red or white instead. Summary of our commander. Firstly, let's go over the basics of what our commander actually says and does. This is the first step in accepting the one true king. Ribbit. Gitrog is a 6/6 legendary creature frog horror for 3 colorless, black, and green. It has Death Touch, 1 static ability, and 2 triggered abilities. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice the Gitrog monster unless you sacrifice a land. The first of the 2 triggered abilities. This is obviously not what you want as a standalone, but obviously this isn't a top CEDH commander for no reason, so let's keep going. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. The exploration effect helps to offset the pain of Gitrog's first ability. We'll often be able to play Gitrog, then a second land, holding up a fetch as that second land is a common play. Ad nauseam becomes a lot easier with just that 1 extra land. Whenever 1 or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, draw a card. Wow. This ability is what makes the deck work. Remember the upkeep cost? Now it's a Phyrexian arena. Being able to draw a card when a land is put into the graveyard from anywhere is what enables our primary game plan of Dakmor plus discard outlet. This ability is just amazing. and we're about to see why. Is the deck and combo non-deterministic? Short answer, no. This deck has produced a lot of discussion on the actual legality of what we aim to do, so here are some definitions and rulings that should clear up any doubts on its legality. MTR 4.4, loops. IPG 3.3, tournament error, slow play. These two links provide definitions of what is and is not a deterministic combo, as well as what is and is not considered slow play. For convenience, here are some brief definitions of all the relevant terms. Deterministic, a set of actions that can be repeated with the exact specifications for any number of iterations. Deterministic combos are shortcuttable. Non-deterministic, again, a set of actions that you can do, but this time you can't guarantee you'll get exactly the same results. You're still playing the game and advancing your board, though. This is where our deck drawing combo lies. Slow play. This happens when you take a bunch of actions that lead literally nowhere. If you find yourself having gained nothing when playing a deck, you may have violated slow play rules. For more, look up the Four Horsemen deck. To put it simply, Gitrog's draw the deck line is not shortcuttable, but it is inevitable. All other combos are deterministic. What makes Gitrog unique? Many things, actually. This deck is more or less one of a kind in EDH. No competitive deck comes close to being like the Gitrog monster, and that's a big part of the deck's appeal. As far as lands.deck strategies go, all of them before Gitrog have been non-competitive and effective only in more casual metagames. While someone like Azusa, Lost But Seeking, does have a fast engine to ramp out a few Eldrazi, infinite mana combos or more recently dedicated strip mine lock builds, it is still considered too inconsistent and slow for actual competitive games, mostly due to a lack of tutors and draw power in the command zone. What about other decks in the Golgari identity? None of them are like Gitrog, but you do have options if you want to play a black-green deck of a different kind. Varol's the Scar-Striped is slightly powerful for competitive tables right now, being a Protean Hulk combo deck. Nath of the Guiltleaf and Marin of Clan Neltoth also have some potential to work in competitive tables. Nath is a hard stacks deck that seeks to grind the game to a halt, while Marin is more of a value-oriented stacks reanimation deck, and kind of a hybrid between Varol's and Nath. Now that we've gone through the ins and outs of how the deck wins the game, it's time to explore the ways we can reach that goal. This Gitrog deck is a fast combo list, and it favors speed and resiliency as its main weapons against other decks, seamlessly switching between the fast combo and mid-range archetypes and their game plans. On the flip side, the deck's weakness is its interaction suite, or lack thereof, so it's important to pick your battles wisely when using your interaction. Game plan. Citation. Leptus's Gitrog Dredge. As a straight citation from Lab Maniac Siggy's deck Chainveil Teferi Primer, here are the main variables that one must consider each time you start a game. Opening hand. Other decks at the table. Position at the table. Next, we're going to elaborate on these factors in detail and how they affect Gitrog's game plan as a whole. Early game and opening hand. Before going through our deck's specific game plan, it's good to look at what kind of cards we're looking for in our opener. Our primary hand should have a bit of everything in terms of roles the different cards fill in our deck. A hand with about 2 to 3 lands, 2 to 3 pieces of ramp, 1 card advantage source, and 1 to 2 tutors combo cards would be an ideal starter. Having interaction and or protection in your opener is situationally relevant and often useful, but it's important to remember that we're a fast combo deck first and foremost. Winning the game quickly often acts as our primary method of interaction, so don't be afraid to rely on the speed of your hand if you're provided with the opportunity. To start with hands you want to mulligan, here are several types of hands that should be avoided if possible. Too many lands. As with all CEDH decks, having too many lands at expense of business cards like ramp, tutors, or card advantage is not beneficial for your game plan, as you'll often take too long to create a board presence while the opponent has locked the game down or comboed off. No lands. To keep playing through the early turns, you need to have permanents in play that allow you to play spells, which is why having lands is almost always essential. One-landers should be watched out for, but are keepable if the rest of your hand can be played out and is very well balanced otherwise. Very slow hands. Your primary game plan in your opener is to get a card advantage engine going, so if your hand lacks draw, tutors, or enough ramp to put Gitrog in play quickly, it should be shipped. When you've gotten to a hand that is none of the above and has business, the first thing to do is to evaluate the speed of your hand, which is primarily determined by how fast you can establish a board presence and how fast you can see and or gain access to the cards in your deck. Board presence can potentially mean many things, but it essentially is measured by the amount of mana you have access to in relation to your opponents. For instance, playing out something like a Mana Crypt on turn 1 allows for a relatively strong early game board presence. Other decks can often do even better than that by playing out more fast mana rocks, or alternatively mana denial in the forms of cards like Trinisphere or Winter Orb. Despite this, Gitrog can regularly outdo even them due to the high density and diversity of mana acceleration in this deck. Lands, cheap mana rocks, mana-producing creatures like Llanowar Elves, Black Rituals. Strictly speaking, our deck is littered with mana generators. These cards construct your board presence and allow you to cast more spells as well as more expensive spells faster. After achieving a strong board presence, we next have to find ways to use that mana to drive our advantage further. That's where the other factor of speed comes in, the access to as many cards as possible. By default, Gitrog herself is our card advantage generator, which is why hands with dedicated ramp are often good enough for a keep. Despite this, having a backup engine in your opener comes in handy in case Gitrog gets countered or removed, which happens often enough to be counted as a factor. As a rule of thumb, the slower your hand is, the more you can expect interaction when Gitrog is cast, and therefore the more need there is for you to have a backup engine in hand. To sum up the points above, here's several types of hands that you're most often looking for. Hard ramp. A hand that can cast Gitrog by turn 2 or 3 will often be a good hand, as Gitrog can propel you forward as long as you have lands to follow up with after casting her. Ramp plus a contingency plan. Hands that can cast Gitrog by turn 4 or 5 but also have business going if she gets countered are also good, especially in a control-heavy matchup. At these tables, Gitrog is a prime target for removal, so a backup plan in case that happens is important. Engines. If your opener has some sort of value engine like Sylvan Library, Necropotence, or Life from the Loam, you are often also good to go. The deck is littered with ramp and fast mana, so you'll be able to get to Gitrog mana often in no time through your engines. Ramp plus Ad Nauseam, or a tutor for Ad Nauseam. Early Naz hands are as broken in this deck as in any other fast combo deck. If you can hold up Nauseam mana to cast it by the end of turn 2, chances are you're doing very well. Matchups. The second large factor that decides what approach we're going to make is the initial matchup. As we sit down to the table with Gitrog, take a close look at the decks your opponents are playing and consider what game plans they may have. Classifying these by their speed and interactivity will help you define the initial role at the table. Classifying these by their speed and interactivity will help to define your initial role at the table. Upon identifying your matchups and opponents' game plans, it's time to adjust your own game plan accordingly. Are you up against a lot of fast combo decks? You're likely to be the predator, and it's often a matter of racing to victory as fast as possible. Are you up against multiple blue control decks? Let the opposition hold up their counters and slowly accumulate value through your engines while looking for a window to combo off. Are you up against stacks? Look for an opportunity to either combo through the stacks pieces or to remove them through your removal suite. Are you up against a mixed table? Your plan may vary. These game plans may not even apply to every game, and there is a possibility of specific scenarios caused by other variables such as your opening hand, turn order, and individual cards being played by your opponents. As the game advances, your role may also change at a moment's notice, so it's integral to your success to always recognize your role, and when it changes, then exploit it. As the game advances, your role may also change at a moment's notice, so it's integral to your success to always recognize your role, and when it changes, to exploit it. Turn order. In a multiplayer free-for-all game such as EDH, turn order has some special qualities to it in comparison to 1v1 formats. Going first is obviously an advantage, but it's often not as useful as in 1v1 as you have potentially 3 opponents eyeing your first moves. Like above, looking at your matchups is key when elaborating on the consequences of turn order. Does a stacks player or a combo player go first? Does the combo player untap before or after the control player? Do you have to interact before establishing your own board presence because of turn order? These are all things that should be considered when starting a game, and even though our deck lacks in the interaction department, turn order often can affect how greedily we want to push our advantage forward. If you're going first, for example, there probably won't be any stacks pieces hindering you on your turn 1 plays. However, people might be using all they can to stop your early game plays because of the advantage you have, so plan accordingly. Now that we've gone through most of your early game variables, it's time to take a look at how the deck fares after our initial turns. Gitrog's mid and late game. By the time we've proceeded past the early turns that are more or less covered above, it's time to look at our side of the board first and foremost. Do we have Gitrog on the field? If not, try to resolve her through upcoming disruption with any protection we might have access to, that usually being a land tutor for Cavern of Souls. If we already have a Gitrog on field, it's time to abuse all those sweet abilities she has with lands. Fetch lands becoming cantrips is incredibly good for longevity, and if we can get access to things like Bazaar of Baghdad, Life from the Loan, or Ramanap Excavator, we can grind to Value Town for pretty much as long as Gitrog is up and purring. Seeing as we won't be actively losing life through these engines, they're a big factor in why Gitrog has reach even in our longer games. It's something to keep in mind when playing against heavy interaction and or stacks, where preserving a decent life total can be incredibly relevant. If we still can't get Gitrog to stick on the battlefield for any reason at this point of the game, it's still more advisable to rely on the card advantage engines shown above, particularly in conjunction with Bazaar of Baghdad. As Bazaar allows us to dig for cards, we can slowly but surely sculpt our hand to find more fast mana that can then be used to recast Gitrog. Drawing into protection, discard outlets, and dredgers will also help further the game plan, as they help with comboing off as soon as Gitrog sticks. Gitrog's late game is not much unlike her mid game, as our Frog Overlord won't really quit grinding value for us as long as we have enough lands to feed her. Fortunately, feeding lands often is way more easier at this point due to the deck's high land count and card drawing power. Assuming we have no ways to combo off at this point, it's advisable to consider looking into the Dakmorless win con lines referenced in the combos section. Dredge Chaining. Citation, Leptus's Gitrog Dredge. Bazaar of Baghdad, a land where when you tap it you draw 2 cards and discard 3 cards. Vintage Dredge churned up to 11. When Gitrog is used in conjunction with Bazaar, things will get a bit unconventional. The important things to remember are that both draws, if replaced with a dredge, bring separate draw triggers from Gitrog due to the following ruling. 120.2. Cards may only be drawn one at a time. If a player is instructed to draw multiple cards, that player performs that many individual card draws. If, for example, we were to dredge from both draw a card effects that Bazaar provides us with, and both dredges hit a land card, we get 2 Gitrog triggers put on the stack after we have discarded 3 cards and resolved Bazaar's activation completely. We can even discard the cards we dredged back to dredge them again for more card draw and mill. These interactions with dredge make Bazaar an outright ridiculous value engine with Gitrog in most situations, and this, along with the fact that it doesn't cost us any life, is very hard to remove and very easy to recur, makes it a prime target for our land tutors from mid-game onwards, assuming we can't just combo off at the time. The process Leptus has described here is called Dredge Chaining, and is used for more than just a benefit off of Bazaar. During the cleanup step sculpt, We'll utilize this process to increase our hand size in an attempt to be less vulnerable to interaction. Dredge Tutoring. Historically, Gitrog lists ran Sylvan Scrying as a method of finding Dakmor salvage, or just to ramp a bit if you really needed it. Modern lists have replaced land tutors with creature tutors due to their higher flexibility and utility. The most immediate question is, how do I find Dakmor now? The answer to this question is Dredge Tutoring. With our high density of creature tutors, we have consistent access to Golgari Grave Troll, and can use its dredge ability to cycle through our deck to find Dakmor. Golgari Grave Troll, 4 colorless and a green. It is a skeleton troll. It has other text on it, as well as Dredge 6. Requirements. Part of this requires you to have to be able to draw a card, so it can only be done if you have some way to do that. We will assume a starting state in which Golgari Grave Troll is in your hand, and Gitrog and any discard outlet is in play. Procedure. Discard Golgari Grave Troll. Resolve the draw trigger as Dredge 6. If you hit a land, repeat this process. If you do not hit a land, you need to get another draw trigger to continue. Once Dakmor is milled, you can dredge it back to your hand and proceed to the main combo. The Grind Game. Life from the Loam is 1 colorless and a green. It is a sorcery. It says return up to 3 target land cards from your graveyard to your hand. Dredge 3. Should you find the game is overly stalled out by your opponents, you may need to begin aggressively abusing a few key cards for the deck. Life from the Loam, Ramanap Excavator, and Chains of Mephistopheles. These cards all interact extremely well with our game plan. As a whole, Loam and Ramanap generate massive amounts of card advantage, while Chains unequally hits our opponents while functioning as a combo piece for us. Loam specifically is one of the best cards you can find in the deck, as it generates that insane advantage while also serving as a dredge tutor for Dakmor once we need it. Obviously, we are not a grind-centered deck, but these cards allow us to keep up with some very slow game plans. Combos. Finally, the part you've all been waiting for. Citation: the Gitrog Monster Documentation. This section will be brief on words, as it is already fairly dense with loops. In general, you should proceed as described in the combo outline section of the primer. Drawing the library. Preface. Although the setup to draw your library will always be the same, there are a few different veins in which you can execute this. Each of them has their benefit, and here we will detail 2 of them. They are identical until just before actually drawing the library. Requirements: Dakmor salvage in hand, a discard outlet, and the Gitrog monster on the battlefield. Procedure: discard your Dakmor salvage to your discard outlet, triggering the Gitrog monster. Resolve the draw trigger, choosing to replace the draw with Dakmor salvage's dredge. 2 cards have hit the yard the moment you choose to dredge and have one of 6 configurations. If 2 non-land cards hit the graveyard, no triggers happen, and you discard Dakmor salvage again. If 2 lands or 1 land and 1 non-land hit the graveyard, a Gitrog trigger goes on the stack. You discard Dakmor salvage in response. If 1 land and 1 shuffler, a shuffler referring to either Kozilek Butcher of Truth, Ulamog the Infinite Gyre, or Gaia's Blessing, then a Gitrog and shuffle trigger each go on the stack. Resolve the shuffler first, then discard Dakmor salvage with the draw trigger still on the stack. If you get 1 non-land and 1 shuffler, or 2 shufflers, a shuffler trigger goes on the stack. Let it resolve, then discard Dakmor salvage again. Note, this is a normal procedure. If this occurs upon your first dredge of Dakmor salvage after a shuffle, then you must dredge again until you hit a land and draw a card before letting the shuffle resolve. The worst case scenario is that you hit 2 shufflers immediately after each shuffle every time, and you end up drawing lands off of each Gitrog trigger until the library is devoid of all but 1 land and all the non-lands. The solution is to discard all your lands besides Dakmor salvage and draw that amount of cards from your library. Repeat this process if we continue assuming the worst case scenario until your graveyard and or library is just lands and shufflers. If you draw your Eldrazi Titan during this process, then simply discard it. Once your library is devoid of anything but lands and shufflers, you can dredge Dakmor Salvage until you generate enough draw triggers to draw the rest. To resolve any excess draw triggers, you can either discard non-land cards followed by a Titan, or you can repeatedly discard a Titan to resolve them one at a time. To dissipate any draw triggers left over once you finish stacking and drawing your library, just discard a Titan and draw it until the stack is empty. Mana loops. With your library in hand, you now want to develop a combo that produces mana to win the game. We can do this as stated above using Lotus Petal and Crop Rotation. Note that if you're at Sorcery speed, these can both be used. Sorcery speed, Lotus Petal. Preface. This section is based on something called Causaland loops, created by Leptis. For those who want a more in-depth understanding of the deck, a more general and descriptive version of this combo will be found in the advanced Gitrog parkour. Requirements: an empty stack, graveyard, and library. There are no other requirements beyond drawing the deck. Procedure: cast Lotus Petal. Discard any land, holding priority on the draw trigger. Discard a Titan. Shuffle. Discard and dredge Dakmor, stacking the draw trigger below the shuffle and resolve the shuffle trigger only. Discard and dredge Dakmor, stacking the draw trigger below the shuffle again, but hold priority on the shuffle trigger. Crack Lotus Petal for any color. Resolve the shuffle trigger and all 3 draw triggers. After step 7, you have returned to your initial board state with an extra floating mana. Repeat this process until you have an excess of all necessary mana. Instant speed crop rotation. Preface. Looping crop rotation is a very useful tool to get access to many different resources, especially for getting green mana at instant speed. Use this line first if you are attempting to go off at instant speed and have at least 2 creatures in play. Again, if you would like a more detailed and general form of this combo, refer to Advanced Gitrog Parkour. If you do not have Gaia's Cradle, whether by Forbidden Tutor or budget, you may also use Twilight Mire in conjunction with Dark Ritual. Refer back to the Lotus Petal section to loop Ritual by casting it in step 6 rather than cracking Petal. In this way, you can make boundless black mana. If you have another green left over, that black mana can be filtered to green by activating Mire during crop rotation loops rather than Cradle. Requirements: 1 green mana, a total of 2 or more creatures in play. Procedure: discard a land holding priority on the draw trigger. Discard a Titan, resolve the shuffle only. Discard and dredge Dakmor, stacking the draw trigger under the shuffle. Resolve the shuffle trigger only. Repeat step 3 until there are 6 draw triggers on the stack. Resolve 2 draw to draw your land and Titan. Discard any non-land card. Discard a Titan. Shuffle. Discard Gaia's Cradle. Cast Crop Rotation. Resolve the draw trigger, but hold priority on the spell. Discard a Titan. Shuffle. Resolve Crop Rotation. Binding Cradle. Resolve 2 draw triggers. Discard a Titan. Resolve 2 draw triggers. Tap Gaia's Cradle for 2 green or more. Repeat these steps to yield boundless green mana, sacrificing Cradle to Crop Rotation while discarding a random land in step 8 in future cycles. To make black mana, just switch out Cradle for a swamp. Winning the game. After generating the necessary mana to win, we have a few different options to end the game. Primarily, we should go for looping Assassin's Trophy on all our opponent's permanents, and then going to combat with Finale of Devastation, giving all our creatures haste and a large buff. Destroying all permanents, Assassin's Trophy. This is generally the first thing you should do after making mana. The process to loop this is much as the same as with Lotus Petal, but with a step change to casting Trophy. The requirements are an empty stack, graveyard and library, and boundless mana. Discard any land holding priority on the draw trigger. Discard a Titan and shuffle. Discard and dredge Dakmor, stacking the draw trigger below the shuffle, and resolve the shuffle trigger only. Discard and dredge Dakmor, stacking the draw trigger below the shuffle again, but hold priority on the shuffle trigger. Cast Assassin's Trophy. Resolve the shuffle trigger and all 3 draw triggers. Repeat this to destroy all permanents. This process can be used with any instant and will be detailed further in the Kazalan section of the combos. Going to combat, Finale of Devastation. The easiest way we have to win a game is by going to combat with a pumped Finale of Devastation, giving all our creatures haste and +X/+X. The haste is important here, as it means we can still do this even if we started the turn with just 1 creature in play. This isn't really a loop. All you have to do is play out enough creatures to hit each opponent with at least 1, then cast Finale with X greater than the highest life total, attack, and win. Post-combat wins, Deathrite Shaman. To win with Deathrite Shaman, we need a few things, including the necessary instants and sorceries to activate its each opponent loses 2 life ability. We run about 30 instants and sorceries, so more than enough to kill people at 40 life. This is not including the spells built up in your opponent's graveyards over the course of the game. There are several different lines to loop this ability, and here we will list the most effective one, with the rest being found in advanced Gitrog parkour under the sorcery speed section. Requirements: an empty stack and library, life from the loam in your graveyard, and boundless mana. Procedure: cast Deathrite Shaman, cast Finale of Devastation with X equals 10, discard a Titan, and shuffle. Discard 3 lands, draw 3. Cast Loam targeting the 3 lands. Discard a random instant sorcery card. Activate Deathrite Shaman. Cast Culling the Weak, holding priority on the spell. Discard a Titan and shuffle. Discard 3 lands, draw 3. Resolve Culling the Weak. Cast Loam targeting the 3 lands. Discard a Titan, shuffle. Discard a Titan and shuffle. Discard 3 lands and draw 3. Cast Loam targeting the 3 lands. Repeat these steps until your opponents are dead. Thank you for joining us for Masterpiece Primer. I'm Sean, aka Mailing a Bear, and that was the collaborative Gitrog Primer, a primer for the Gitrog monster by the Gitrog Monster Discord server. If you would like to read further about this list, it will be linked in the description below, and there are plenty of videos out there from wonderful other content creators. We thank you for spending time with us, and we hope you have a wonderful evening. Good night.